Back home now, members of the Minot City Council discussed community members' feedback on how to best spend the Community Development Block Grant at this week's regular meeting. Chris Plank, Disaster Recovery Grant Administrator, says they've narrowed stakeholder suggestions from 2 public input meetings. The top 5 recommended areas were getting a year-long homeless shelter for families and individuals, increasing transportation options, increasing child care services, mental health services, and addiction services.
The main goal is to have sustainable living, sustainable communities, and opportunities for those individuals who may be of the low to moderate income.
Council members talked about the importance of prioritizing when determining how to use those funds. The city will be receiving $331,000.